My family humiliated me on Christmas Eve, handing my gift to my unemployed brother because he needed a win while sneering that I was too old for presents. I didn't scream. I simply smiled, excused myself to the bathroom, and permanently deleted the $20,000 retirement surprise I was seconds away from revealing. I know it sounds petty, but wait until you hear what they said to me before I pulled the plug. If you've ever been the family doormat, you need to subscribe to see how this ends. I'm curious, what's the worst gift you've ever received? Tell me in the comments. The envelope in my purse felt heavy, even though it only contained a single sheet of cardstock. It wasn't just paper. It was the culmination of 3 years of overtime, skipped vacations, and aggressive saving. It was the confirmation for a 14-day, all-inclusive Mediterranean luxury cruise for my parents, Gary and Linda. A retirement celebration. The grand voyage they had whispered about since I was a little girl, the one they claimed they could never afford because they were too busy raising us. I stood on the porch of my childhood home, the icy December wind biting at my cheeks, trying to compose myself. I wasn't just tired, I was depleted. My job as a senior financial analyst for a major firm in the city demanded 60-hour weeks, and the last quarter had been particularly brutal. I had flown in on a red-eye that morning, running on caffeine and the desperate, naive hope that this Christmas would be different. Inside, I could hear the muffled roar of the television and the clinking of glasses. My brother, Mason, was already there. Of course he was. Mason didn't have a job to fly back from. At 29, he was currently in between ventures, which was code for sleeping in his old bedroom and spending our parents' pension on investments that never materialized. I took a deep breath, clutching the strap of my bag where the $20,000 surprise sat waiting. Just get through dinner, I told myself. Give them the gift. See them smile. Maybe, just for once, they'll look at you the way they look at him. I opened the door, forcing a bright smile onto my face. "Merry Christmas," I called out, stepping into the warmth of the hallway. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey was thick in the air, a smell that should have been comforting but instead tied a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Silence greeted me. I walked into the living room. Dad Gary was in his recliner, a beer in hand, eyes glued to the football game. Mom Linda was fluttering around the coffee table, arranging appetizers. And Mason was sprawled on the sofa, occupying 3 cushions, laughing at something on his phone. "Oh, you're here," Mom said, not looking up from the deviled eggs. "Wipe your feet, Claire. I just had the carpets done." "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad," I said, my voice faltering slightly. I walked over to give her a hug, but she deftly pivoted to adjust a stocking on the mantel, leaving me embracing empty air. "Hey, sis," Mason said, not looking up from his screen. "You bring the good scotch, or did you cheap out again?" "Mason, be nice," Dad grunted, though his eyes never left the TV. "She just got here. Let her take her coat off before you start begging." I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's fine, I thought, they're just stressed. I moved toward the tree. It was buried under a mountain of gifts. My contribution was modest this year in terms of physical boxes, a few nice sweaters, a new tool set for Dad, because the real gift was in my purse. "Dinner's in 10, Mom announced. "But let's do 1 or 2 gifts now. Mason's been impatient." "I'm not impatient," Mason grinned, finally sitting up. "I'm just brimming with holiday spirit." We sat. The dynamic was as familiar as the furniture. I took the stiff armchair in the corner, Mason took the center of the room. Mom handed Mason a box, designer sneakers, then another, a new gaming console, then another. Cash. I watched, a polite smile plastered on my face. I was 32, a grown woman. I didn't need toys. I could buy whatever I wanted. But the disparity was breathtaking. For me, Mom handed over a small, unwrapped bag containing a scented candle. "It's vanilla bean," she said dismissively. "I know you like boring things." "Thanks, Mom," I said. "It smells lovely." Then came the moment that shattered everything. There was one box left under the tree. It was wrapped in elegant silver paper with a blue ribbon, my signature wrapping style. but I hadn't wrapped it. I recognized the tag immediately. It was from Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister who lived in Paris. Aunt Sarah was the only one who really saw me. She had texted me weeks ago saying she was sending something special, something she had picked up at an estate sale, specifically for me. The tag clearly read, "To Claire." Mom picked up the box. She looked at the tag. Then she looked at Mason. "Here, sweetie," she said, extending the box. "Toward my brother." I froze. "Mom," I said, my voice sharp, "that tag says Claire." The room went quiet. Mason's hand was already on the box. Mom didn't even blush. She just shrugged, a casual, cruel motion of her shoulders. "I know, Claire, but I opened it earlier to check. It's a vintage chronograph watch. Men's style, really? Bulky." "It's a Patek," I whispered. I knew Aunt Sarah. She didn't buy junk. "Mason has been having such a hard year," Mom continued, her voice taking on that sugary, defensive tone she used whenever she was robbing Peter to pay Paul. "He's been so down about his business falling through. He needs a win, Claire. He needs something to lift his spirits." Mason ripped the paper off. He opened the velvet box. Inside sat a stunning, vintage timepiece, easily worth $5,000. "Whoa," Mason said, whistling. "Sick." He slipped it on his wrist. It didn't even fit properly. It slid down his forearm. "Thanks, Mom." "Mom," I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky. "That was my gift from Aunt Sarah. You can't just give it to him." Dad muted the TV. He turned to me, his face twisting into a scowl of annoyance. "Claire, stop making a scene. It's Christmas." "I'm not making a scene, I'm stating a fact," I argued, my voice rising. "That is my property. It has my name on it." "He'll appreciate it more," Mom said, cutting me off with a wave of her hand as if swatting away a fly. "You have a job, Claire. You have money. You can buy yourself 10 watches if you want. Mason has nothing right now. Look at him. Look how happy he is." "She's right, sis," Mason said, holding his wrist up to catch the light. "Don't be greedy. You're always counting pennies." "I am not." "You're too old for presents anyway," Dad interrupted, his voice booming. "Grow up, Claire. You're in your 30s. You should be giving, not taking. Expecting a handout at your age. It's embarrassing." The words hit me like physical blows. Embarrassing. I looked at them, the tableau of my family. My father judging me for wanting a single token of affection. My mother stripping me of my identity to clothe my brother's ego. And Mason wearing my theft on his wrist, grinning like the cat who got the cream. I felt the envelope in my purse burn against my hip. The cruise. The $20,000 gesture of love I was about to bestow upon these people. "You're too old for presents." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, metallic click of a vault door closing forever. "You're right," I said. The sudden calmness of my voice surprised even me. I sat back down. I smoothed my skirt. I looked at Dad, then Mom, then Mason. "I am too old for presents," I repeated, forcing the corners of my mouth up into a smile. "I'm sorry, I was being selfish. Merry Christmas, Mason. Enjoy the watch." Mom let out a sigh of relief. "See, was that so hard? Now let's eat." "Actually," I said, checking my phone, I don't feel well. I think the flight really took it out of me. I'm going to wash my face." "Don't take too long," Dad grumbled, turning the volume back up. I walked to the downstairs bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet so they wouldn't hear me. Then I pulled out my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. My hands were perfectly steady as I opened the travel agency app. The bathroom was a shrine to my mother's superficial perfectionism, guest towels that were never to be touched, soaps shaped like seashells that had gathered dust for a decade. I stared at myself in the mirror. The fluorescent light was unforgiving, highlighting the dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't hide. I looked successful, professional, and utterly hollow. "He'll appreciate it more." The sentence replayed in my mind on a loop, each repetition sharpening my resolve. It wasn't about the watch. I could buy the watch. It was the principle. It was the casual erasure of my existence. To them, I wasn't a daughter, I was a utility. I was the backup generator that kept the lights on when Mason blew a fuse. And Mason was the main attraction. I looked down at my phone. The app was open. Booking reference, 88,392G status, confirmed. Passenger S, Gary Miller, Linda Miller. Total cost, $19,850. I had booked the presidential suite. Balcony, butler service, unlimited excursions. It was non-refundable in cash, but because I had purchased the elite travel insurance. Ironically, to protect them in case of health issues, I could cancel for any reason up to 24 hours prior for a full credit to my account. The trip was scheduled for January 5th. I was well within the window. My thumb hovered over the red cancel booking button. A memory flashed, Dad at my college graduation, looking at his watch, complaining that the ceremony was too long. Mom at my promotion dinner, spending the entire meal talking about Mason's new DJ career. You're too old for presents. Okay, Dad, I whispered to the empty room. I'm too old for presents. You're definitely too old for a $20,000 vacation on my dime. I pressed the button. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel? This action cannot be undone. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Processing. Booking canceled. Your refund of $19,850 has been initiated. A strange sensation washed over me. I expected guilt. I had been conditioned for guilt my entire life. But instead, I felt lighter. It was as if I had just dropped a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for 30 years. But I wasn't done. The cancellation was just the defense. I needed to secure the perimeter. I opened my banking app. For years, I had maintained a joint account with my parents. It was technically for emergencies, but in reality, it was their slush fund. I deposited $1,500 into it every month to help out with groceries and bills, knowing full well that money often funneled straight into Mason's pocket. Current balance, $4,200. I hit transfer. Destination, my personal savings. Amount, $4,200. Transfer complete. I left the account with $0. Then I went to the Scheduled Transfers tab. Monthly transfer, $1,500. Delete. I took a deep breath. In the span of 3 minutes, I had reclaimed nearly $25,000 and cut off their financial IV drip. They had no idea. They were out there eating deviled eggs, admiring Mason's stolen watch, thinking they had won. They thought I was the submissive, quiet Claire who would swallow the insult to keep the peace. They had forgotten one crucial thing: I was a financial analyst. I understood risk, I understood leverage, and I understood when an investment had become a liability. My family was a toxic asset, and I had just liquidated my position. I flushed the toilet for the sound effect and washed my hands. When I looked in the mirror again, the woman staring back didn't look hollow anymore. She looked dangerous. I unlocked the door and walked back out into the hallway. Everything okay? Mom asked as I re-entered the living room. She was slicing the turkey now. Never better, I said, my voice smooth and bright. I just needed to freshen up. Well, sit down, Dad commanded. Mason was just telling us about his new business idea. It's going to be huge. Oh, really? I asked, sitting down and unfolding my napkin. I looked at Mason across the table. He was wearing the Patek Philippe. It looked ridiculous on him, clashing with his ragged hoodie. Tell me all about it, Mason. It's a crypto mining setup, Mason said through a mouthful of stuffing. I just need a little startup capital for the servers, like 10 grand, but the ROI is gonna be insane. Dad nodded sagely. You have to spend money to make money. We were thinking, Claire. Here it comes, the pivot, the ask. We were thinking, Dad continued, that since you're doing so well, maybe you could help your brother out, as a Christmas gift. I smiled. It was a razor-sharp smile. A gift? But Dad, you just said I'm too old for presents. Doesn't that mean I'm too old to give them too? Dad frowned. Don't be smart, we're talking about family. Right, I said, family. I touched my purse under the table. The notification email for the cancellation would hit Mom's iPad in. I checked my mental clock. The travel agency usually sent automated emails instantly. Mom's iPad was sitting on the sideboard, pinging occasionally with Facebook notifications. It was only a matter of time. To understand why I didn't flip the table right then and there, you have to understand the architecture of my family. It wasn't built on love. It was built on a very specific, lopsided contract. I was the responsible one. From the time I was 7, I was folding laundry, making my own school lunches, and tutoring Mason. If I got an A, it was expected. If I got a B, I was asked why I wasn't applying myself. I was the investment vehicle they expected steady, boring returns from. Mason was the dreamer. If he drew a stick figure, he was the next Picasso. If he failed a math test, it was because the teacher didn't understand his creative mind. He was the high-risk, high-reward stock they kept pouring money into, hoping for a moonshot that never came. Growing up, I made myself small so Mason could be big. I took the smaller bedroom so he could have the one with the window seat. I drove the rusted-out sedan so he could have the safer SUV when he turned 16. I convinced myself this was nobility. I convinced myself that if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, and solved enough of their problems, they would eventually love me as much as they loved him. But the antagonist of this story isn't just Mason. Mason is a symptom. The true architects of this disaster were Gary and Linda. Dad was a retired factory foreman who missed the days when his word was law. He was loud, opinionated, and deeply insecure about his own lack of financial success. He used my career as a trophy to brag about to his friends, but in private, he belittled my expertise. Number cruncher, he'd call me, bean counter, as if my 6-figure salary was a cute little hobby. Mom was the grand manipulator. She operated on guilt. She was a master of the backhanded compliment and the strategic tear. She had curated a reality where Mason was a victim of a cruel world, and I was the fortunate, ungrateful daughter who refused to share her luck. "You have no idea how hard it is for him," she would say to me, usually while asking for money to pay his car insurance. It hurts a mother's heart to see one child soar and the other struggle. So I paid for the car insurance. I paid for the emergency dental work. I paid for the lawyer when Mason got a DUI. And then there was the cruise. I had spent months planning it. I knew they had never traveled. I knew Mom cut pictures of Greece out of magazines. I wanted to give them the world. I wanted to prove, once and for all, that I was the good daughter. I had crafted a reveal speech. I was going to hand them the itinerary over dessert. I had imagined tears. I had imagined Dad hugging me, really hugging me. I looked at them now, eating their turkey, oblivious to the fact that the daughter they were currently hustling for 10 grand had just severed their financial lifeline. "So about the servers," Mason pressed, wiping grease on his sleeve. "I found a guy selling the rigs cheap. I just need the cash by Tuesday." "Claire can write you a check before she leaves," Mom said confidently. She didn't ask, she stated. $10,000 is a lot of money, I said calmly. "You make that in a month," Mason scoffed. "Don't be stingy." "Actually," I said, leaning forward, "I don't have $10,000 for you, Mason." "Why not?" Dad demanded. "You spend it on fancy clothes or that apartment downtown." "No," I said, "I just don't have it for this." The air in the room shifted. They weren't used to no. They were used to "I'll see what I can do," or "maybe next month." "Excuse me," Mom put her fork down. "Are you punishing your brother because of the watch? Claire, that is incredibly childish. I told you he needs this." "He needs a job, Mom," I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "He needs to stop spending your retirement money on pipe dreams." "It's not a pipe dream," Mason yelled, slamming his hand on the table. The potek rattled against the wood. "You're just jealous because you're a corporate drone and I'm an entrepreneur." "You're unemployed, Mason," I shot back. "And that watch on your wrist, it's stolen property." "Enough," Dad roared. He stood up, his face turning red. "I will not have this disrespect at my table. Your brother is trying to build something. You should be supporting him, not tearing him down. You think just because you have money you're better than us." "I never said that," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You act like it," Dad spat. "Walking in here with your nose in the air, refusing to help family. You know what? If you're going to be this toxic, maybe you should just leave." There it was, the ultimatum: comply or get out. In the past, I would have crumbled. I would have apologized. I would have written the check just to make the shouting stop. But not tonight. Tonight, I had a secret weapon. Tonight, I knew something they didn't. "You want me to leave?" I asked softly. "If you can't be supportive, yes," Mom said, her lips a thin line. "Go back to your fancy apartment. We'll enjoy Christmas without your negativity." "Okay," I said. I stood up, I picked up my purse. "Wait," Mason said, looking panicked. "What about the check?" "Mason," Mom hissed. "Let her go, she'll come back, she always comes back. She'll feel guilty by tomorrow and transfer the money." I looked at Mom. Her arrogance was blinding. She truly believed she owned me. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad," I said. I didn't say goodbye to Mason. I walked to the door. "Don't expect a plate of leftovers," Dad yelled after me. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold night air. I walked to my car, got in, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw the living room light glowing warm and yellow. I merged onto the highway, heading back toward the city. I turned on the radio. And then, 5 minutes into the drive, my phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again. "Incoming call, Mom. Incoming call, Mom. Incoming call, Dad." I didn't answer, I let it ring. The iPad must have refreshed. My phone didn't just buzz, it convulsed. It danced across the passenger seat of my car like a possessed object, the screen lighting up the dark interior of the vehicle in rapid, strobe-like flashes. "Ping, Mom, what did you do?" "Ping, Mom, email says trip canceled. CLAIRE, answer ME." "Ping, Dad, you selfish little witch, pick up the phone." "Ping, Mason, dude, WTF, Mom is crying, fix this." I kept my hands at 10 and T. Whoa, staring straight ahead at the highway. The white lines blurred into a rhythmic streak. I wasn't crying. I wasn't hyperventilating. For the first time in years, my heart rate was steady. It was the calm of the executioner who has finally dropped the axe. I drove for 45 minutes in silence, letting the notifications pile up like snow against a drift. When I finally pulled into the parking garage of my apartment complex, I turned the engine off and just sat there. The silence of the garage was heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city and the ticking of my cooling engine. I picked up the phone, 47 missed calls, 63 text messages. I scrolled through them, dissecting the anatomy of their panic. It started with confusion. Why did we get a cancellation email? Must be a glitch. Morphed into accusation. Did you do this? And finally settled into unbridled rage. You are dead to us if you don't rebook this right now. They didn't care that I was gone. They didn't ask if I got home safely. They didn't apologize for the watch or the insults. They only cared that the faucet had been turned off. I took the elevator up to my floor, my mind shifting gears. I was no longer the hurt daughter. I was the analyst. When a client comes to me with a bleeding portfolio, I don't weep for their losses, I look for the leak. I entered my apartment, my sanctuary. It was clean, quiet, and smelled of the expensive reed diffusers I bought for myself because no one else would. I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of water, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. If they were this desperate for $10,000, so desperate they would try to bully me into writing a check immediately after humiliating me, it wasn't for servers. Mason didn't know a server from a toaster. I logged into the banking portal. I had removed myself from the joint account an hour ago, but I still had the login credentials for their primary checking account. I had set it up for them 5 years ago when they couldn't figure out online bill pay. I knew it was a breach of privacy to look, but I needed to know the landscape of the battlefield. I navigated to the transaction history. "Okay, Mason," I whispered to the screen. "Let's see what kind of entrepreneur you really are." The account balance was $412. I scrolled back. The $1,500 I sent every month usually hit on the first. Nav 1, transfer from Claire plus $1,500. Nav 2, withdrawal cash $500. Nav 3, debit purchase Liquor World $124.50. Nav 5, debit purchase GAMESTOP $79.99. Standard parasitic behavior, but then I saw the patterns shift in December. Deck 10, Venmo payment to Big T Invest $2,000. Deck 12, Venmo payment to Big T Invest $1,500. Deck 15, overdraft fee $35.00. Who was Big T Invest? I opened a new tab and ran a quick search on the handle. Nothing on LinkedIn, nothing on business registries. I checked Instagram, private profile, but the profile picture was a stack of poker chips. I went back to the bank statement. Deck 20, cash advance, credit card, deposit plus $5,000. My stomach dropped. They had maxed out a credit card for a cash advance. That came with an interest rate of nearly 30%. Deck 20, Venmo payment to Big T Invest $5,000. They had burned through $5,000 of borrowed money in seconds. And today, they wanted $10,000 more from me. I sat back, the pieces clicking together. This wasn't a business. It wasn't crypto. Mason was gambling, and he was losing bad. The servers were just the cover story Mom and Dad had swallowed, or perhaps the lie they were helping him spin. I needed more than just bank statements. If I was going to sever ties completely, I needed to ensure they couldn't drag me down with them. I logged into the credit monitoring service I used for my own identity protection. I froze. There, under inquiries, was a hard credit pull from 3 weeks ago. Lender, Quick Cash Auto Loans. Applicant, Claire Miller. I hadn't applied for a car loan. My car was paid off. I felt a cold sweat prickle at the back of my neck. They hadn't just insulted me. They hadn't just taken my money. Someone, and I had a very good guess who, was trying to use my creditworthiness to plug the hole in their sinking ship. I wasn't just dealing with a toxic family anymore. I was dealing with financial fraud. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Mom. I didn't call Dad. I called my lawyer, David. It was Christmas Eve, and I knew his rates would be double, but I didn't care. "David," I said when he answered, his voice groggy, "I need to freeze everything, and I need to draft a cease and desist. Tonight." I didn't sleep. I spent the night changing passwords, locking credit files, and disputing the inquiry on my credit report. By the time the sun rose on Christmas morning, the sky was a bruised purple, matching the dark circles under my eyes. I expected a text. I expected a call. I didn't expect the poo. Ending on my door at 8:00 a.m. "Claire, open this door. We know you're in there." It was Dad. His voice wasn't festive. It was thunderous. I walked to the door. I checked the peephole. It wasn't just Dad. Mom was there, looking frantic, her makeup from yesterday smeared. And Mason stood behind them, hands in his pockets, looking less like a hotshot entrepreneur and more like a cornered animal. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, but I didn't step aside. I stood in the threshold, blocking their entry. "Merry Christmas," I said flatly. "Merry Christmas?" Dad practically spat the words. He pushed past me, forcing me to step back or be trampled. "You think this is funny? You think ruining your parents' retirement is a joke?" They spilled into my living room, bringing a chaotic energy that disrupted the peace I had cultivated all night. "We got the email, Claire," Mom said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and tears. "It says the refund was processed to the original form of payment, to you." Yes, I said, leaning against the kitchen island, crossing my arms. That's how refunds work. That was our trip, Mom screamed. You gave it to us. You can't just take it back because you got your feelings hurt over a stupid watch. It wasn't about the watch, Mom, I said calmly. It was about what you said. You said I was too old for presents. You said I should be giving, not taking. So I listened. I decided to stop taking the burden of your retirement on my shoulders. You vindictive little. Dad stepped forward, his finger raised. I raised you better than this, to be this petty over a gift. It's $20,000, Dad, I said. That's not petty. That's a down payment on a house. That's my freedom. And honestly, I realized last night that I can't afford to send you on a luxury cruise. Not when I have to save up to fix the identity theft issue I just discovered. The room went dead silent. Mason's head snapped up. His eyes met mine, and for a second I saw pure terror. Identity theft, Mom asked, blinking. What are you talking about? Someone tried to take out a car loan in my name 3 weeks ago, I said, keeping my eyes locked on Mason. Quick cash auto loans. Ring a bell, Mason. I don't know what you're talking about, Mason stammered, looking at the floor. Probably a hacker, with all the data breaches. Stop it, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I checked the IP address on the application, Mason. It came from the house, from the Wi-Fi network I pay for. Mason, Dad turned to him. What is she saying? She's lying, Mason yelled, his face turning blotchy red. She's just making stuff up to justify stealing your vacation money. She's trying to frame me. And the $10,000, I pressed. The servers, I know about Big T Invest, Mason. I saw the Venmo history on Mom and Dad's account. Mom gasped. You looked at our bank account. Yes, I did, I said. And it's a good thing I did. Because your entrepreneur son has gambled away $5,000 of your credit card money in the last 2 weeks alone. The 10 grand he wanted from me, it wasn't for hardware. It was to pay off a bookie. Mom looked at Mason. She looked at me. Then, in a move that I should have predicted but still managed to stun me, she turned her anger back on me. So you spied on us, she hissed. You invaded our privacy. I saved you from bankruptcy, I countered. Mom, he's bleeding you dry. He made a mistake, Mom shrieked, stepping between me and Mason like a human shield. He's under a lot of pressure. He's trying to make something of himself, and sometimes you take risks. If you had just given him the money, he wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. I stared at her. Are you serious? You're blaming me for him gambling. You have so much, Dad grumbled, shaking his head. You sit here in this high-rise with your fancy furniture and your 6-figure job, and you can't help your brother out of a jam. You have to humiliate him. You have to call the police on him. I haven't called the police yet, I said, but I did freeze my credit. You need to fix this, Dad commanded. Rebook the cruise, write Mason a check to cover this debt, and we will forget you ever acted this way. Forget, I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. You want me to pay for the privilege of being abused? You want me to pay off his gambling debt? It's what family does, Mom insisted. We help each other, we forgive. No, I said. You forgive him, you use me. There's a difference. If you don't help him, Dad said, his voice lowering into a threat, don't bother coming around anymore. No Sunday dinners, no holidays. You'll be alone, Claire. Is that what you want? To be a bitter old maid with nothing but her bank account. They thought the threat of exile would break me. They thought the fear of loneliness was their ace in the hole. Get out, I.S. Aid. What? Dad blinked. Get out of my apartment, I said. Now. They left, but they didn't go quietly. Dad kicked my door frame on the way out, leaving a scuff mark. Mom was sobbing loudly enough for the neighbors to hear, wailing about how she had raised a monster. Mason just hurried out, looking back at me with a glare that promised retaliation. I locked the door and slid the chain into place. I was shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The war had officially begun. Over the next 48 hours, the digital assault was relentless. Mom posted a long, vague status on Facebook about children who forget where they came from and the pain of betrayal. Dozens of her friends, people who had known me since I was in diapers, commented with sympathy, calling me ungrateful without even knowing the story. Then came the flying monkeys. My Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, called me. "Claire, I heard you canceled your parents' retirement trip. How could you be so cruel? They're heartbroken." "Did they tell you why I canceled it?" I asked. "They said you got mad that Mason got a better present," she scolded. "Claire, you're an adult. Jealousy is ugly." I didn't argue, I just hung up. But the silence from Mason was what worried me. He wasn't texting, he wasn't commenting. That meant he was plotting. On December 27th, I went into the office. I needed the distraction. I was reviewing a client's merger proposal when my personal cell rang. It was Aunt Sarah, from Paris. I hesitated. Had Mom gotten to her too? Was she calling to scold me for not appreciating the candle? "Hello, Aunt Sarah." Claire, her voice was crisp, with that slight French inflection she had picked up over the decades. "I am confused. I just got off the phone with your mother." "Oh," I said, bracing myself. "I can explain." "She thanked me for the watch," Sarah said. "She said Mason loves it. She said you thought it was too masculine, so you gave it to him." I gripped the phone, the audacity. They weren't just stealing, they were rewriting history to cover their tracks. "Aunt Sarah," I said, my voice shaking. "That's a lie. They gave it to him. I begged them not to. It had my name on the tag." There was a long silence on the other end. "I see," she said. "And the cruise? Linda told me you promised them a cruise and then canceled it because you were having mental health issues." "I canceled it because they told me I was too old for presents," I said. "And because I found out Mason has been stealing from them and tried to steal from me." "Stealing?" Sarah asked sharply. "Gambling," I corrected, "and identity theft." "Claire," Sarah said, her tone shifting from confused to steely. "That watch, it was my late husband's. It was not just a gift. It was an heirloom. I sent it to you because you are the only one in that family who understands the value of time and hard work. I specifically told Linda not to let Gary get his hands on it." "Mason is wearing it right now," I said. "He's scratching it up while playing video games." "I am going to make some calls," Sarah said. "Do not let them bully you, ma chérie. You are stronger than them." Hanging up with her gave me a second wind. I wasn't alone. I had an ally. But then the other shoe dropped. I received an email alert from my bank, not the one I shared with my parents, but my personal, primary checking account. Alert: suspicious activity detected. Attempted transaction, $4,900 Venmo. Status: declined. I logged in frantically. Someone had tried to link my primary checking account to a new Venmo profile. They had my account number and routing number. Ow. Then I remembered. A year ago, I had written a check to Mason for his car repair. He had mobile deposited it. He still had the physical check. He had the numbers. He wasn't stopping at the credit application. He was trying to drain my liquid cash. This was no longer a family squabble. This was active warfare. I called David again. "It's escalated," I told him. "He tried to access my checking account." "Okay," David said. "We have enough for a police report now. Attempted wire fraud, identity theft. Do you want a file?" I closed my eyes. I pictured Mason as a little boy, holding my hand crossing the street. Then I pictured him sneering at me, the Patek on his wrist, calling me stingy while trying to rob me blind. I pictured Mom defending him. I pictured Dad telling me I was too old for love, but apparently just the right age to be a victim. "Yes," I said. "File it. And David, I want to pursue the money they took from the joint account too. Technically, I can prove that 90% of the deposits were mine. I want to sue for misappropriation of funds." "That's scorched earth, Claire," David warned. "There's no coming back from suing your parents." I looked at the framed photo on my desk, a picture of me and my parents from 10 years ago. I looked happy. They looked indifferent. They burned the beat. Ridge, David, I said. I'm just blowing up the foundations so they can't rebuild it to come after me again. Proceed, David said. Proceed, I echoed. I hung up and opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it Evidence. Into it went the screenshots of the texts, the bank statements showing the gambling debts, the credit inquiry, the declined Venmo transaction. I was building a fortress, and the next time they came knocking, I wouldn't just open the door. I would hand them a subpoena. I checked the time. It was 5:00 p.m. I had one more thing to do. I needed to let them know that the game had changed. I sent a single text to the group chat, including Mom, Dad, and Mason. Me, I just got the alert about the attempted Venmo transfer from my checking account. I know it was you, Mason. The police report for identity theft and attempted fraud is being filed as we speak. Do not contact me again. Communicate only through my attorney. I put the phone down. I waited for the explosion. The silence that followed my text message was deafening, but it was the calm before the artillery barrage. They didn't reply. They didn't call. For 3 days, there was nothing but a void where my family used to be. Then on December 30th, the summons came. Not a legal one, a social one. It was an email from Mom, CCing the entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and even a few family friends. Subject, New Year's Eve and family healing. Join us to ring in the new year and celebrate fresh starts. We are putting a difficult year behind us and focusing on forgiveness. Gary and I are hosting a dinner. We hope all our children will be there to show that family is stronger than any misunderstanding. It was a trap, a beautifully decorated, passive-aggressive trap. If I didn't go, I was the stubborn daughter refusing healing. If I did go, I was walking into an ambush where they would pressure me to drop the charges and the lawsuit in front of witnesses, relying on my desire not to make a scene to force my compliance. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the delete key. You should go, a voice said from the doorway of my kitchen. I turned. Aunt Sarah stood there, looking chic in a silk scarf and wool coat, holding a fresh croissant. She had flown in from Paris that morning, bypassing my parents' house entirely to stay in my guest room. If you don't go, Sarah continued, taking a bite of the pastry, they will tell their version of the story. They will paint you as the villain. Sometimes, Ma Chérie, you have to walk into the lion's den to show the lions you are the one with the whip. I don't want a scene, Sarah, I sighed. I just want to be done. Then finish it, she said, her eyes flashing. Go, take the evidence, and take me. I have a watch to retrieve. So we went. New Year's Eve was bitterly cold. We pulled up to the house my monthly transfers had helped maintain, and saw it lit up like a beacon. Cars lined the street. They had invited everyone. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a courtroom, and the jury was stacked with people who only knew Mom's version of events. I walked in with Sarah on my arm. The conversation died instantly. Claire, Mom cried out, rushing forward with a performance-worthy smile, wearing a sequined dress I knew she couldn't afford. She stopped short when she saw Sarah. Her face paled. Sarah, I didn't know you were in the country. Evidently, Sarah said coolly, not offering a hug. Hello, Linda. Well, come in, come in. Dad boomed from the living room, though his eyes narrowed when they landed on me. Glad you decided to do the right thing, Claire. We moved into the living room. Mason was there, holding a beer, surrounded by cousins. He looked smug. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, and on his wrist, glinting under the recessed lighting, was the Patek Philippe. Hey sis, Mason called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Glad you made it. No hard feelings, right? New year, clean slate. He was banking on the audience. He thought I wouldn't dare bring up the fraud in front of Uncle Bob or Cousin Jenny. We'll see, I said quietly. Dinner was an exercise in torture. Mom made a toast about financial struggles and family sticking together through hard times, casting meaningful glances at me. Dad told a story about how some people lose their way and get greedy, while staring directly at my forehead. I ate in silence, biding my time. The explosion happened over dessert. "So, Claire," Uncle Bob asked, oblivious to the tension, "Gary tells us you've been working too hard, stressed out. That's why you canceled their big trip." I put my fork down. The clink against the china rang out like a bell. "Is that what they told you?" I asked, looking at Mom. "We're just worried about you, sweetie," Mom said quickly, her eyes wide with warning. "You haven't been yourself, the outbursts, the paranoia." "Paranoia," I repeated. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. I placed it on the table. "Is it paranoia when I have the IP logs?" "Claire, put that away," Dad warned, his voice low and dangerous. "Not here." "No, Gary," Aunt Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the room. "Let her speak. I am curious why my gift to her is on your son's wrist." Mason hid his hand under the table. "Mom gave it to me," he muttered. "After they told me I was too old for presents," I added, looking at Uncle Bob. "And then, when I refused to give Mason $10,000 to cover his gambling debts, they kicked me out." "Gambling debts?" Cousin Jenny whispered. "Lies," Mom shrieked, standing up. "She's lying, she's jealous of him." "Am I?" I opened the folder. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I simply began to pass the papers around the table, copies of the bank statements, the Venmo transfers to Big T Invest, the credit inquiry from Quick Cash Auto Loans, the police report number. "Here is the $5,000 he stole from the joint account," I said, pointing to a highlighted line as my aunt read it. "Here is the attempt to open a line of credit in my name, and here is the attempted transfer from my personal checking account that triggered the fraud alert." The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper. "Mason," Dad said, looking at the papers in Uncle Bob's hands. "What is this? You said you needed money for servers." It's doctored," Mason stammered, standing up, knocking his chair over. "She made it up. She's a distinct analyst or whatever, she can fake documents." "I didn't fake the police report, Mason," I said coldly. "Detective Miller, no relation, is the one handling the case. He said the IP address traces back to this house, to your laptop." Dad looked at Mason. For the first time, I saw the blinders fall away. He saw the sweat on Mason's brow. He saw the terror. And he realized that his golden child had not just failed, he had committed a felony against his own sister. "You stole from her," Dad whispered. "And you stole from us the credit card." "I was going to pay it back," Mason yelled, his voice cracking. "I just needed a big win. I had a system. If Claire hadn't been such a bitch about the money, I could have fixed it." "Don't you dare speak to her that way," Aunt Sarah said, standing up. She walked over to Mason. She was a foot shorter than him, but she loomed like a giant. "Give me the watch." "It's mine," Mason sneered, clutching his wrist. "Mom gave it to me." "It was never hers to give," Sarah said. "It belonged to my husband, a man who worked for everything he had. You are a thief and a coward. Take it off, or I will call the police myself and add possession of stolen goods to your list of charges." Mason looked at Mom for help. Mom was slumped in her chair, weeping into her napkin, unable to look at anyone. Slowly, furiously, Mason unbuckled the watch. He slammed it onto the table. "Fine," he screamed. "Take it, take everything. You all want me to fail anyway." "No one wanted you to fail, Mason," I said, my voice steady. "We just wanted you to grow up, but it's too late for that now." I stood up. I looked at the extended family, my aunts and uncles who were looking at my parents with a mixture of pity and disgust. The facade was gone. The perfect family, myth my mother had cultivated for decades, was shattered, lying in pieces among the cake crumbs. "I'm leaving," I said. "Happy New Year." "Claire, wait," Dad said, his voice broken. He looked old suddenly, defeated. We can work this out, don't leave like this." "There's nothing to work out, Dad," I said. "You made your choice on Christmas Eve. You chose the thief. Now you have to live with him." I took the watch from the table, handed it to Sarah, and we walked out. The silence followed us all the way to the car. The fallout was swift and absolute. Mason was arrested 3 days later. It turned out I wasn't the only one he had tried to defraud. There were 2 other credit cards in Dad's name that had been maxed out, and a loan shark who was much less polite than I was had started making threats. Faced with the mountain of evidence I provided, and the pressure from the other creditors, Mason took a plea deal. He avoided prison time by agreeing to 5 years of probation, mandatory gambling addiction counseling, and restitution. But the restitution was a joke. He had no money. The burden fell, as it always did, on Gary and Linda. But this time, I wasn't there to bail them out. To pay off the loan shark and the credit card debt to avoid a lawsuit, my parents had to sell the house. The house I had grown up in. The house they had planned to retire in. They downsized to a 2-bedroom rental in a less desirable part of town. I didn't help them move. About 3 months later, I met Dad for coffee. It was the first time I had seen him since the party. He looked thinner, his bravado as gone. "Your mother misses you," he said, stirring his black coffee. "She cries every day." "She misses the ATM, Dad," I said gently. "She misses the security I provided." "That's not fair," he said, though he didn't argue with much conviction. "We messed up, Claire, we know that. Mason has problems, we were blind." "You weren't blind," I corrected him. You were willing to sacrifice me to save him. That's what I can't forgive." He sighed, looking out the window. "Is there any chance? I mean, the rental is expensive, and with the inflation." He was asking again, even now. "No," I said. I placed a hand on his, not in affection, but in a gesture of finality. "I am not your retirement plan anymore. You have your pension. You have Social Security. You have each other. Figure it out." I stood up. "I have to go. I have a flight to catch." "Where are you going?" he asked. "Paris," I smiled. "Sarah and I are going on a river cruise, a real one." I left him there with his coffee and his consequences.